next in April on the board. He's going to ask the board to consider for the mayor. My brother was there. I wasn't there. My neighbors were there. Were you there? I didn't go, but I was supposed to go and I didn't. It was pretty cool. My McDonald's, 300 people. It was, I've never seen it so bad. Because I think it was back. Well, it was 2 years without. Right.
How are you? How you doing?
Good. Bart Lenahan was taking them out. Good morning, everybody. Thank you for coming. Start with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible,
with liberty and justice for all.
All right. I'll note that all members are in attendance, and Ms. Anado and Ms. Joe Davis Chappelle is attending remotely, which is permitted under the statute. And I will move to accept the minutes from the, no, we don't have minutes, do we? No, okay. I will move to acknowledge the Secretary of State's Directive 2022-28 ballots and candidates for May 3rd, 2022 primary election for all offices. If there's a second. Second. Great, thank you, Mr. Wondlowski. Do we have some other walk-on directives, Mary? Here? Yes, we do. Okay, and then I will move to accept the advisory 2022-02 substitute Senate Bill 102 and changes to the local option election law, as well as Directive 2022-29 legislation regarding uniformed and overseas citizens absentee ballots and ballot transmission instruction. If there's a second. Second. Thank you. Any question or comment about the walk-on directive, advisory, and the directive acknowledgement of the directive in our agenda?
Yeah, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I do have one question. So I understand the one directive and the action taken extends the deadline for the UOCAVA voters, for the military voters to receive and return the ballots. Does that extension help us in processing those ballots?
What that does is it prevents us from missing what was the March 18th deadline. So we won't have to worry about that. The new deadline is, I believe, Tuesday, April 5th. And we should be able to meet that deadline for sending out UOCAVA, at least electronic form of UOCAVA ballots. Right now, the printing of ballots, we have to figure out how to cut days off of our schedule to get that, so we are able to print things prior to the opening and absentee. We're not there yet. So for the purposes, though, we will be able, at least electronically, be able to send out UOCAVA ballots, and then those get remade. And even if we had to send out a PDF ballot for mail out, again, we can do that and remake those. So we should be able to comply. It's just the form of the ballot that we'll be able to send.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye. Aye.
Motion passes unanimously. Good morning, Mr. Lawler.
Good morning.
And we're going to hear from Mr. Lawler is going to tee it up about the certification of the United States Congressional, Ohio General Assembly, and State Central Committee candidates for the May 3rd, 2022 primary election. Mr. Lawler.
Brent Lawler, manager, candidate, petition services. In front of you, you should have a list of congressional, state, house, and senate, and state central committee to be certified to the ballot. But before we get to that, two candidates are just in question. They are not on your list, so if the board, yeah, they can make a motion either not to put them on the ballot or to put them on the ballot. The first person,
I'm sorry to interrupt. Could you just put the mic closer to your mouth? Thank you, Brent.
is it on?
It is on, but it needs to be a little closer to you. All right, yeah, a little taller for you. How about that? Yeah, thank you.
Is that better?
Oh, yes.
Mr. Hempel is here today. In reviewing his petitions, it's sitting down after he notified that his petition was short. He sat down with registration manager Betty Edwards, and all said and done, he was still short 5 ballot signatures. And in discussion with Mr. Hempel, those 5 signatures, we happened to have 5 that were not genuine. And he has now gone out, or his secretary has gone out and obtained affidavits, which I believe the board now has. And he's here to discuss the issue. I know in the past the board has considered that and sometimes put them on the ballot. So he is short 5. If you do decide to take the 5 affidavits that you have sufficient signatures, it should be certified to the ballot.
Thank you, Mr. Lawler. Well, why don't we have a hearing on this matter? And you provided us with a summary also in our agenda. Is Mr. Hemphill here?
Yes.
You could come up here, sir. Over here to this. Okay, how do you pronounce your name, sir?
Hemphill.
Hemphill, thank you. Mr. Hemphill, why don't you raise your right hand? We're gonna have Steve swear you in, okay?
You solemnly swear that the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
Okay, Mr. Hemphill, you're under oath, all right? We're gonna ask you some questions here, and I think you have some information you want to share with us too, as the board, correct?
Yes.
Okay, we have your petition, we have the affidavits?
Yeah.
So why don't you tell us what do you think the board should do with regards to your petitions?
Obviously, I think that they should accept them. The circulator, they all happen to be from the same circulator. And in that, I discussed this with him, and most of them are either his close family or close friends. So he was able to gather them all together this past Saturday and have them sign affidavits stating that was them on those petitions. I was hoping that some of them would show up today, but as of right now, no one has come.
And who was the circulator?
Richard Stanley,
Mr. Stanley, so you asked him to come down.
well, he said that he could not because he's working right now.
Mm-hmm. And then what about the people that signed here?
Well, I only had 2 that committed to come, but they have not shown up as of right now.
And then these are affidavits, though, all in the same language, but a different name that says they.
Well,
Go ahead.
In total honesty, I was the one who kind of put that together. I typed that out and I gave it to him, and I'll give it to him for him to give to them to sign. Because I just didn't want any missteps or anything. I just wanted everything to be out there so that you guys could see from there.
And so these were all signed in front of a notary, is that correct, Mr. Hemphill?
They are all signed and stamped in front of the notary.
So that means the notary saw these individuals sign these documents.
Yes.
Is that, did you see these individuals sign these
I
documents?
was not present.
Other questions from the board members?
No, Mr. Chair, I'm, in reviewing these, Brent, did you see these as well?
Did you just now?
Okay.
I mean, in reviewing these signatures look a lot like the ones that from the registration of these voters. So I'm in favor of accepting these 5 signatures.
I'm,
And I'll make that motion.
Are these unaffiliated?
no, you're running as a Republican,
I
right?
know, but I'm just saying, doesn't that matter? I mean, what the registration of these individuals? Are these unaffiliated registered Republicans?
Oh, that's the question. She
Yeah.
says, can they sign?
Yeah,
They are valid, if they were to be accepted, they are valid signers.
okay, so they would
Yeah.
qualify
They're
for,
qualified to sign.
okay, that was my
It's just
question.
that it's not Jim.
Oh, okay, gotcha,
So that's our registration.
My motion stands. Mr. Chairman.
okay.
Thank you. I will second Mr. Wondolowski's motion. I just want to get through. He needed 5 signatures, Mr. Lawler?
That's right.
And you've submitted more.
There's 5 here.
Oh, you submitted 5?
Yeah.
Okay, oh, I must have a duplicate of it too.
And those signatures look identical to their registration.
I'm, satisfied with the additional proof, but I know David Sapella and Ms. Sticken, do you have any comments or questions? Mr.
I do. I mean, I'm satisfied with the proof. I'm not going to second guess somebody's sworn affidavit, but the signatures, there's the conclusions reached by our staff to me are appropriate given the original registration, in some cases a registration signature or electronic poll book signature. In other cases, they do not match the signatures on the petitions. And I mean, I love the way that they said it. They don't have any qualities that match the registration signature, but I'm not going to second guess somebody's sworn affidavit. So I will support the motion in that regard, albeit somewhat reluctantly. I'm a little disappointed that we don't have the circulator down here because, one could make an argument that those original signatures, clearly weren't signed by those people. But I will accept the proof that's offered and support the motion.
Any other question or comment? Here, none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Motion passes unanimously. Okay, Mr. Hemphill, thank you for your time, sir.
Thank you very much.
All right, and then on to Mr. Lawler, we got Mr. Is that Donald Truve?
Correct.
Trex?
Correct.
I don't know that there's anything that we need to do in this regard other than acknowledge his written letter to us.
He said he was going to be here today, so I'm surprised he's not. I know his attorney could not make it, I let him know, so we couldn't postpone that hearing because the law we have to certify today. So he's still short the 6 signatures. So we would ask you not to certify the ballot.
Well,
based on, unless you would consider his letter, discuss his interpretation of the petition.
Well, what I'd like to suggest is we'll acknowledge his, the fact that, the board's report, staff's report about the insufficient number of signatures. We'll acknowledge his written documents to us explaining why he thinks should be included because it says should in the petitions as opposed to shall. It's point well made, actually, I think. But the law is clear, right, Mr. Musson, that you can't count the ones from another county.
Unfortunately, yes, the statute's clear. The petition, face of the petition might be a little inaccurate or imprecise, but the statute clearly has you discount or not count the signatures that are from the minority county.
Is that something we should look at changing?
We might want to raise that with the Secretary of State. I think it's their form. It's the Secretary of State's form. Might want to point it out that there's a little ambiguity there.
Yeah, I think that's a fair point to make down there. Any other questions? Because what I would like to do is then acknowledge the staff's report, Mr. Truex's documentation set forth in the agenda. And I will move to not certify Mr. Truex's petitions to the ballot for the reasons our staff has set forth in the agenda. Second, thank you. Are there any other questions or comments? If hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Yes, if Mr. Truex should appear, I'll have him be heard again. All right, and then on to the certifications, Mr. Lawler.
You should have a list of state House and Senate, congressional, and state central committee.
All right, I will move to certify to the United States Congression. I will move to certify the United States Congressional Ohio General Assembly and State Central Committee candidates for the May 3rd, 2022 primary election set forth in our agenda. If there's a second.
Second.
Thank you. Any questions or comments? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
And then I will move to acknowledge the withdrawal of candidates for the May 3rd, 2022 primary election. Is set forth in our agenda. That's Thomas Jackson from the House State Representative District 19 and State Central Committee District 24, Austin Keller, as well as County Central Committee Cleveland 07. That's for Cynthia Lindsay. If there's a second.
Second.
Thank you. Any question or comment?
Here, comment.
Yes.
Can we just have the record state that the second one, her name will appear on the ballot, right? On the bottom of the list. I don't have it in front of me.
Cynthia Lindsay.
Cynthia Lindsay, yes. She's passed the deadline for withdrawal of the name to be removed from the list, so it's like the minutes have recorded that name will appear on the ballot,
But not be counted.
but not count.
I see. Thank you. I will have that friendly amendment to my motion. Any other question or comment? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Motion passes unanimously. On to the personnel agenda, Mr. Pilati.
Good morning. On today's personnel agenda, this pertains to Ohio Senate Bill 9 that appropriated funds for boards of elections, or gave them funds to Secretary of State for boards of elections to help navigate through these unusual times that we are faced with for this primary. Cuyahoga County has received the funding agreement. We received that last week, and Deputy Director Gallagher and I signed that and returned it back to the Secretary of State's office. In that funding agreement, it defines specific costs that you can utilize this funding for. And one of those is administrative costs that allow for overtime payments to permanent employees for items such as data entry, voting machine programming, reprogramming, testing, training costs, ensuring voter rolls, poll worker recruitment and training, and review and improvement of processes to promote the board's efficiency in this primary. With that, what we are asking the board is for our permanent employees to be able to take advantage of this. So for our exempt employees who would be participating in these duties, they would receive overtime payment in lieu of exchange time at straight rate. And for non-exempt employees, again, engaging in these activities, they would get overtime payment at straight rate for hours 36 up to and including 40, and above 40 hours at time and a half. For this, Deputy Director Gallagher and I, we would sit down with the managers, come up with the mechanics, probably on a week-by-week basis, we would define this function qualifies for it. So it's not wide open and everybody, it's for these set things. So we would do that on a weekly basis and communicate that with human resources and with the fiscal office who has in charge of payroll. And we would, we did get notification since the agenda was published. Governor signed it. The Secretary of State has said that the commencement of this is really with the commencement of the duties. So we are able to go back in time. So for example, when the first directive was issued to program our system for General Assembly things, that would probably be one of the first markers that we could do. And then we would take that forward. We would review this on a regular basis. We want to be cognizant of the funds and make sure that we have funds, we're not going to overspend. So we're going to go ahead and do that, as well as we also have to determine and find out if there's any other costs that are called for, allowed for in this funding agreement that are above and beyond these, that we would use those funds and make sure that we have a good balance.
A few questions, Mr. Pilati. So how much money are we supposed to get?
We're supposed to get $693,000.
And you answered the question, so we can go back. So there are metrics or that we can look at, and we can say, Jeff Hastings worked 50 hours 3 weeks ago, and 10 of those should be paid overtime. That's what you're saying, you're able to do that?
Yes, we're able to do that.
Okay. And third, does an employee have a choice? I mean, could they say, I just want comp time, I don't want the money? Do you know?
I think we drive the bus on this. And I would say for the majority of the employees, I would want them to take the compensation versus time unless they are a newer employee. Reason being is that we've been trying to get employees to get their time balance, their compensatory time balances down from everything they earned in the fall. And I don't want to add to that because we already have an issue where we're trying to get it down. So I would want them to take this money. However, if it's a newer employee and they don't have time, I think potentially maybe we could come up with a uniform way that they could choose it.
It's a case by case basis.
Yes.
Do we have that authority though? I mean, can you tell a person?
What do you think, Lori?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
I have a question. I'm sorry. I have a question. So the agreement the funding agreement doesn't make a distinction between exempt and non-exempt employees. Is it our reading that we are able to use this money to pay overtime for board staff that otherwise would not be entitled to receive overtime? And have we run that issue to get clearance from the Secretary of State on that? I mean, it doesn't make a distinction. It just says board staff, but I would hate for us to, there to be an understanding that, well, obviously we didn't mean that you were to use the money to pay overtime to staff that wasn't otherwise legally entitled to overtime. Has somebody vetted that question?
We have not asked the Secretary of State that because our reading of it was just for overtime. And these the exempt employees, they do get overtime. They get, it's exchanged at straight rate. So they are currently accruing something. And we did use grant funds in 2020 to pay all employees, both exempt and non-exempt, for 5 hours of overtime every week. And we did not vet that through the Secretary of State either.
Paying overtime. So, I mean, I thank you for the question, Joe, but I think regardless of the grant, these individuals were always eligible for overtime. I mean, right. They're not making an exception now. They were entitled to overtime prior to this agreement.
Right. It's the rate.
Right.
It's straight versus
Okay.
time and a half.
And the law requires the time and a half for non-exempt.
Okay, thank you for the clarification. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Any other questions for Mr. Colati? I will move to adopt the personnel agenda and authorize, well, you've already entered into an agreement, but to make a temporary compensation adjustment is set forth on our agenda. There's a second. Second. Any further questions or comments? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Motion passes unanimously. Any new business, Mr. Colati?
I'll just try to give you a quick update from last week. Poll worker recruitment is still going well. We actually have had we had a lot of people actually inquire, and I think the incentive of giving them the training bonus early on, we opened up and had a training session even here this past Saturday to try to accommodate the increased flow. So we're at 52% of poll workers hired, which is it's pretty good for where we are at this point in the cycle. As far as the proofing of the ballot department worked through the weekend. They were here 8:30 to 6:30 Saturday, 8:30 to 4:30 Sunday. What they are proofing at this point in time is the layout of the ballot. So we got a directive that tells us the order of the offices. So with that, we were able to lay it out. So they did that. They began to do what we call precinct proofing. So they're going precinct by precinct, looking at that ballot. They have to do that 3 times. They have to do for Republicans, Democrats, and issues only. So each of those is its own separate round. And that went as usual. So there's always some errors that are found, but that's normal. Nothing that was above and beyond. So that will continue on, and they'll work 8:30 to 6:30 Monday through Friday, and then the weekend hours. One thing, and so with that, we are on target for Thursday, April 7th to be able to have the proofing done and give the approval to print. Well, that's 2 days after the opening of absentee. So we have to figure out how to shave off about 5 days off of our processes. We will continue to do that. The cleaner the proofing goes, that's one thing that can help us. We do have additional temps that started today that are on the proofing process. We have the ability to add a few more. That's something where you can only go so large and keep the the quality and the integrity. So I think there's about 2 more teams we can get to. Lori is having some challenges finding resources. You know, even though we're paying $15 an hour, they're not all that excited to come down, especially now because gas is not cheap. So can't catch a break with that, but we are doing that. The one thing that we acknowledged today was this advisory on the local options. That does not help our cause because that requires us now to go in and change some of the language on the issues. Because it says if you haven't printed, you have to do that. Well, we're nowhere near doing that. So now that means we have to kind of rework that layout. That'll take a little bit more time, but we need to comply with that. The other things, we did get a UOCAVA directive that we acknowledged. The fiscal office will work with the ballot department to figure out what this expedited mailing is that we have to do. We have to get some different accounts that I don't think we currently have, but it's laid out in there and they'll start working on that. And vote by mail applications, we have not, so there's different administrative type things. One of them is called closing the election. We can do everything that we're doing up to this point without closing the election. When you close the election is that you absolutely lock it in DIMS for everything. You don't make any changes. So we're able to create a ballot. We're able to hire poll workers, but we're hiring them in a mock system, not in the real. And we're going to have to do some data entry to bring them over. Vote by mail applications can't go in until we lock in. The reason we haven't locked in is because of the uncertainty of the General Assembly and the congressional. And so we're going to monitor this week. And if we know nothing this week, we're going to lock it in, go in, and at that point, we'll be able to start to put some vote by mail applications in. We have a little over 100 UOCAVA. We have about 1,300 vote by mail applications at this point. The reason we haven't locked in is because if they do, let's say, for example, they were to go with 2 elections and they say, okay, some are going to go over here, for example, congressional or General Assembly, and we're going to do everything else, then CPS, and it's a different process for them. And it's a lot easier if we don't lock in for them to make some of those changes if they had to. So I know that's a really technical stuff, but that's kind of what we're trying to balance out, figure that. But everyone is keeping a positive attitude moving forward. I think the ability for them, thank you for approving the ability to pay them monetary overtime when you're working 7 days a week. It's never fun, but I think if, at least on payday, you look back and it seems to be worth it. So thanks for that. And as things develop, we'll just keep you informed.
Okay, we're scheduled to meet next again at the end of,
I believe the first week in April.
first week in April. Okay.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Actually, make you aware just 2 more deadlines. This Thursday, the 17th, is the protest deadline for what we just certified today. And there's a March 26th deadline. This past Thursday at 4 o'clock was the deadline for people who were running either for state Senate or state House. If they wanted to move, they had the ability to file a form with us, and now they have until March 26th to move. I believe we have 4. We had 4 individuals file that form with us. So now they are interested in running in a different district. We provided that information to Brian Cleary, so he moved them around on the ballot. However, they have to complete the actual change their address by the 26th. And if they do that, we're fine. If they don't do that, then the state will give us some guidance, but I think pretty much they appear on the ballot where they are, and then we'll go with withdrawal protocols and do that. So there's still some moving parts, but we'll see.
Any other question or comment from Mr. Pilati? Anyone from the board members? All right, then I will move to adjourn. Have a wonderful week. If there's a second, all in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
Take care, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks for the work.
Yeah, Dave, how you doing?